It's Old News with David and Russell.
Hello, my name's David.
And I'm Russell.
And this is Old News.
It's good to be back, as always. Yeah, so how are you?
I'm alright, yeah. I've got another new job.
Wow.
Third new job in a year. That's some kind of record.
It's the merry-go-round. At this rate of increase, sort of exponential increase, you'll just be whizzing through every department,
Yeah.
for 10 seconds.
I'll be working everywhere in the world, everywhere in the universe.
Simultaneously.
Yeah.
Yeah. You'll be like a quantum of Davids. We'll not know accurately where you are, until we observe you.
Well, no, you'll not be able to measure where I am. You can estimate where I am at any given time, but when you come to look,
on that,
I could be either alive or dead.
Oh dear.
Working or not.
On that equally surreal note. Well, actually, referencing what they call Schrodinger's cat. Well, there was a very famous incident a little while ago, wasn't there, when Stephen Hawking, he was being asked some question in a public forum, and somebody asked him about some aspect of the Schrodinger's cat analogy. And apparently he spent 10 minutes typing on his little keyboard thing he has, and eventually just said, "That damn cat."
Well, because it was an analogy originally written to show how ridiculous quantum physics is. It was never ever supposed to be a good explanation of how quantum physics works.
In that it's meant to be unintuitive.
Yeah.
I don't really understand it. I remember
I read a book once and I understood it while I read the book.
Yeah.
The moment I put the book down, it just kind of leaked out of my ears. When I say I understood it, I understood what the book was saying, which was a popular science. It wasn't an actual science book.
The best example of that is A Brief History of Time, isn't it?
Yeah.
I read that and I hung in there. And I think in the later chapters, it's like, yeah, okay, I'm still there. But then I realised that the moment I finished it, it was like, I didn't retain any of that at all.
Old News.
I did a murder mystery tour of Newcastle the other day.
Oh, right. Yeah, you mentioned this, but this wasn't fully with actors and things, was it?
No.
It was like a virtual murder mystery.
Yeah, you used your phone, yeah.
So you kind of go to a location and then...
The phone uses the GPS and says, there's a clue here. It asks you a general knowledge question about whichever city you're in my case, Newcastle. And then it gives you a witness statement from the witness that you're visiting in that location.
Oh, right. So it's actually just an excuse for a day out and a walk around town.
Yeah.
In a way, yeah.
I'm walking around for about 2.5 hours.
Yeah. Was there lots of other people doing it at the same time?
Loads of people, and lots of people were dressed up. So there was an awfully large number of Poirots in Newcastle that day.
A city stuffed with Belgians.
Yeah.
But so presumably it was set in that kind of era.
No, not at all.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the murder victim was a nightclub owner.
Oh, sort of in
modern day.
contemporary.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Do you think the Poirot character, you could make it into a Bond? You could move it through time?
Yeah, you could. There's no reason why you couldn't, I don't suppose.
That's a curious thing then. So do you think this is going to be a regular event?
Probably. It's a company that does it, so...
Oh, it has a commercial aspect to it.
It'll be in their interest to...
So did you pay?
Yeah, I think it was £6 or something to take part.
All right.
Per person.
Once you finish, you go to the pub with your mates or whatever. And yeah. Oh, that's done good fun. So, other news for Old News in that we had our first anniversary, didn't we?
We did.
Which is... We totally neglected to remark on it in the last episode.
Wasn't it the day after we recorded our last episode or something like that?
Yeah, there's a friend of mine, Raj. He contacted me to mention. Oh, I think it was when we actually issued the episode. Right. He said, "Oh, did you realise? No, this is the first anniversary. Just you didn't mention it." It's like, oh, well done. Thank you very much. I feel like we've achieved a bit of a milestone.
Yeah, we've survived.
Yeah,
without A, killing each other, B, just utterly getting bored, C, running out of subjects.
We've still got a few ideas in the fire for.
Yeah.
No, we've never run out of ideas.
No, we've never struggled. Yeah. We've struggled to choose between ideas.
Yes, yeah.
But we've never actually struggled for ideas.
Yeah. I've been listening back some of the older episodes recently. I don't know, have you done that?
I mean, I've been doing it for the public.
Oh yeah,
posting on Facebook and Twitter and what have you.
Yeah, we greatly improved our graphic design elements of all these, haven't we? So yeah, that's been really good now. So each episode has a photograph and a bit of a graphic associated with it, because Facebook said that's really good for the advertising. So that's why I suggested it. Yeah, well, it's been interesting listening back how I think we have improved. I like the very first episode, we do sound really stiff.
Yeah.
Whereas now I think we've gotten a little bit used to it. But we continue to innovate. So this week's our first time that we're actually recording wearing headphones.
Yeah, we almost look professional.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting though, because you volunteered in kind of community radio for a while. So you know what it's like to kind of speak and hear yourself at the same time.
Yeah, whereas I'm guessing this is new for you.
Yeah, it's a little bit unusual.
Yeah, you've got that split-second delay.
Yeah, well, they do say that people with stammers, like I have, that this is actually good for preventing people stammering.
Right, I've heard you say that before, yeah.
However, apparently it's one of those effects that's temporary. No, it'll be good in the short term, because they did try for a little while to have like a little hearing aid device for folk. There was essentially just a microphone and a delay, and then play back into the ear. Just fractions of seconds, and it does work. You know, people who stammer far less with it. But the reason why it's never become a commercial invention is because it only has a temporary effect, which is a bit sad for people who stammer. Wouldn't it be great if there was a technological solution? But alas, I just rely on you editing it all out. How much of that do you edit, out of curiosity?
Every show is different. There's been a few shows where it's been quite hard. There's been quite a lot. There's been other shows where there hasn't been very much.
Yeah. Because I remember in the very early days you asked me about that, didn't you, whether I wanted it edited, and I said, well, as long as people understand what I'm saying, I'm not precious about it. But it's interesting to think, what image am I projecting? Is it a false image? Would people who meet me be surprised that I might stammer from time to time?
News.
We've also been doing some exciting things in the world of podcasting as well.
We've done a co-production.
Yes, yeah, co-production is the word, isn't it?
We haven't done much of the production, to be fair.
Content. We
provided content.
Yeah. So we did a joint episode with the excellent people from the Last Tuesday Project podcast, which we've mentioned in the past and we've ran advertising for, and it was great to actually sort of meet them in person as such.
To actually see their faces.
Yeah. Because I've seen the little avatars on Twitter, but that doesn't really tell you much. Yeah. But they were all tremendously nice people, and they've already released their little mini-sode. And we do make an appearance in that, don't they? Because they have like a main episode and a mini-sode in between times. One of the things that struck me was how much laughter there was, and it was laughter that I wasn't aware of during the recording. It was excellent, and we look forward to that, the release of that, and we're hoping to release it together, are we?
I think so. You know what? We kind of semi-discussed that, but didn't properly discuss it. We probably should have sorted that out.
We should really have drawn up a contract.
We did call it. Did we call it Last Tuesday's News?
Yes, we did.
Yes, we did.
Yes,
Not
we
Old
did.
Tuesday. We
Yeah.
did consider Old Tuesday.
But last Tuesday's news
Tuesday's
was
news,
pretty good.
Old news.
Oh, right. Yeah, and another thing. And another thing.
And another thing.
We've had some stings.
Ooh.
We've had some
Explain
old-
to people what stings are.
We've had some old some old nye.
Recordings of people saying old
Old
news
news, yeah.
to go with the ones that we use from Peter, who's our regular sort of sting provider.
Yes.
Yeah. So we've had how many?
We've had 3.
Right, excellent. So
One
great
from
to hear
Haley, one from Steve, and one from Etienne. Now, when I play them, I think you'll be able to guess where Steve and Haley are from.
Right, okay, let's have a guess.
Henny, it's old news, man.
Well, didn't you know, like, pet? It's old news.
Old news.
Hey!
Oh,
We heard that time. We got an extra E, yeah.
we could make a Halinator.
We should definitely do that. We should just sample bits of the old the last Tuesday project and just make a Haley soundboard. She would really hate us for that. Oh dear. No, but I mean, they're clearly both from the northeast of England. I'm guessing, in case anybody's wondering, hinny is an affectionate term.
Yeah.
You might use for your other half, or maybe it's a child,
Or just a close friend.
a close friend.
Well.
Yeah. I always remember my granddad calling me hinny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Grandad used to call everybody Hinny.
Well, that's true. He did.
was
He's
friend
very
himself.
affectionate like that.
I remember him calling a waiter in Spain Bonnie Lad. It confused the waiter. Etienne
Etienne is from
lives in Japan.
So thank you for that. It generally surprises me that we have that kind of reach.
Yeah.
That we've got somebody from Japan that may be like a westernized name, perhaps, for somebody living in Japan. We don't know, but thank you for your contribution. I'm quite touched, actually.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. Nice to know that there's a community out there. We've talked in the past about setting up a Reddit page. Is that something our listeners would like? Let us know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we do set one up, it'll be Russell setting that up. Because I have no idea how Reddit works.
Neither do I.
Not the
here we
foggiest.
go. I have downloaded the app on my phone yesterday with a view to this. So
Right, all right. Well, we do have a Tumblr now, and we have a Pinterest board and
Instagram.
To be fair, I think I've only posted 3 times on the Instagram account. But
I'm only just getting into Instagram a little bit. I have one photo on there, which is of the badge on the steering wheel of my car. That's it. So I uploaded as a test at one point.
you scored a nerd.
Old news.
If you would like to contact us here at Old News, there are, of course, the usual methods. You can find us on the old-fashioned interwebs at oldnews.podbean.com. You can email us on oldnewspod@gmail.com. We are available on Facebook. Just search for Old News Podcast, and we're also available on Twitter at Old News Pod. And if you can find us on YouTube, then well done.
Henny, it's old news, man.
So, should we move on to our topic of the...
Yes, but please let me take a swig of my strong Belgian beer of indeterminate strength.
I've got another potluck one, an unlabelled.
I like this Belgian one, actually. It's nice. But unfortunately, nice tasting beer is often a sign of like increased strength.
Oh, well, that stuff is jet fuel.
Let us talk a little bit about tonight's topic, which is...
The Human Genome Project. What has come of the Human Genome Project, more to the point?
I was looking at this, and here in Old News, we've always tried to have a particular date to go by. So we've said the 14th of April 2003, which was announced that was kind of more or less the largely completed project was done. So interestingly though, I think that might be the wrong date we've chosen.
Really?
Yeah, so there's this really complicated story that emerges. The project is first mooted in sort of 83, 85 in America, and there's a bit of advocacy by some very well-known people. There's Watson, who was one of the ones that actually found the structure of DNA in the 50s.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Yeah.
As in Watson and Crick.
As in Watson and Crick, yeah. So and he's one of the early leaders of like one half of the project. And this gets going in 1990. So there's a big public project ran and funded by the USA with international partners, you know, the UK being one of the kind of the main partners, but also France, Switzerland, Canada, you know, and even some of the smaller developing countries committed resources through UNESCO, yeah, which is interesting. But there's a competitor comes onto the scene, which is a private company, the Celera Corporation. And this is led by a chap called Craig Ventnor. So his company comes onto the scene in the sort of late 90s and says, oh, we're going to do this same project with a different tactic and much more sort of computer-heavy computation. Which is what computers do, isn't it?
Yeah,
Computation it's in the name, right? And they come along and they just speed things up, and they take a different technique with how to kind of split the genome up and analyze it, whatever. But because of that, there's like a change in tactics, and there's a rough draft, quote unquote, which is released on the 26th of June 2000. And I think that might be better remembered because there was an announcement of that, which was jointly between President Clinton and Tony Blair.
All right.
Yeah, so, right, given your tone of the voice, I was now going to apply the JFK test. Do you remember this at all?
I can remember announcements. I can't remember politicians getting involved at all. All I can remember was news reports saying it had been completed.
Yeah. I think I can remember the joint press conference vaguely, but it was a classic case of where you got politicians commenting on science issues where they clearly have kind of just a very basic grasp of the science issues.
Yeah.
Much like I do here, really. So when all the kind of prizes come, you know, the actual Human Genome Project and the Celera Corporation actually share the prizes, which I also was a little bit unfair because Celera are Johnny come lately to the party. A huge amount of data is already in the public domain by the time they join, but also they rely on like error checking and things from the main publicly funded project.
So they create some results and then the main project checks for errors?
Well, they were using the data coming out of the main project to check their own errors.
Ah, right.
Yeah, so they're kind of reliant on the public funding anyway. So this is one of these things, right, which I think it splits people ideologically, which I think is really interesting. The main project cost $3 billion, I mean, which is much as dollar, right? Many pesos was spent in the pursuit
Many of your American pesos.
Whereas the project that Celera ran was only $300 million. Fair play to them, and they brought a lot of innovation and different new thinking to it, which was fine. But I think in the end, it was still the publicly funded effort. They would have gotten there in the end with slightly old-fashioned thinking, but they provided so much better quality data. And Celera also went on to say that, oh, our data is private as well.
Right.
And they got a huge amount of criticism for that, and so they said, oh no, we'll make it available, but there's still restrictions on the data that they provided. So they said that academics can get it, but only in certain chunks at a time.
Right.
You know,
so a bit like when you buy channels from Sky, you've got to get them in packages. You can't say I'll have this one, and this one.
That's right, and you can't just download the whole lot as a job lot. Yeah, and they promised they would only patent a certain amount of genes, and in the end they actually put placeholder patents. Well, they promised like 300 to 400 maximum, and they actually patented 6,500. Although a lot of them don't seem to have gone through or sort of been developed commercially. Yeah,
It's so weird. I've never understood that.
I do not understand that as an issue at all.
Yeah.
Because if you take something in nature and read it, essentially...
How is it yours?
Yeah, how can you patent it as like a novel device?
Yeah.
It seems to me there's nothing innovative there. If you've developed a new machine to analyse how to read that, fine.
Then patent the machine.
Patent that, or even patent the technique or the software, or you can patent those sort of abstract ideas. But the fact that you would patent the sequence,
it's like having a magnifying glass and looking at, I don't know, tree rings and patenting the tree rings.
Yeah, I thought the same about like if you cut through a strata of rock and went, oh, there's X many strata of certain types. Oh, I'm going to patent that now.
Yeah. So no one else can ever look at 16 strata?
Well, presumably you can look at it, but you wouldn't be able to make any commercial gain from the insight you get from it.
Yeah.
I don't know, it seems so against the spirit of what founded this project in the first place.
It's a very American idea, isn't it? It's a very sort of Republican in office, except it wasn't.
Well, in the 80s when this project first mooted, it's Reagan.
It's Reagan. It is. It's very. Oh, we're going to commercialize this as much as we possibly can, and make sure the big corporations can make as much money as they possibly can out of it. I
think we'll touch on this later about the commercial sort of pressures here, which I think are actually one of the interesting stories that comes out of this. But yeah, there's reading a bit about it online. There does seem to be this very American slant on things, and sort of Celera's view on things, the way they did things, the way they behaved was kind of very, very commercial, let's say.
Old news.
So just to sort of do the last little bit of narrative here, really, because we've got this kind of rough draft in 2000, there's the announcement of completion in 2003, but actually it's not until May 2006 there's the last chromosome is finally published in Nature, one of the more august journals. One of the things I liked actually was when they made the announcement of the rough draft was that the paper that was given by the Human Genome Project was published in Science, and the equivalent paper from Celera was in Nature.
All right.
So there's this sort of equal billing giving, but through different channels. So that was sort of a nice touch. Interestingly, the whole project only maps 92% of the genome.
Well, they're not finished yet then?
Well, yeah, it's interesting, right? So I have two words to share with you, but I don't know what they mean. So the 92% is it eudochromatic? The other 8% is heterochromatic. But I went to look up what those terms mean and I was slightly lost. But as far as I understand, the idea behind the project was that you would take a handful of samples of a genome and you would read those and basically find all the bits they had in common, and it was like a representative sample in a way. But the 92% is the bit we all have in common. In the 8% is a lot of like really tightly bound variable stuff, the stuff that's harder to read. Okay. And is probably to do with more with the variations and so on. So there is now a new project which is all dedicated to reading that. So they've taken samples from Japan, China, Western Europe, an African group, to like give a spread. Remember, listeners, we'd very much like everybody to share and subscribe. So we're available on iTunes, Pocket Casts, Player FM, and all your favourite podcast apps, and also on InTune Radio, and even through Amazon's Alexa. So like, rate and subscribe, and reviews on iTunes, please. Thank you very much. curious thing, because I think this is one of the things that really is a criticism of the project, is that one of the main donors is one guy from New Jersey.
Okay. But to the public project?
Yeah, I mean, basically the whole genome effort is mostly this one guy.
All right.
Right? So obviously in that there might be a bias in that it's one dude, and we don't really know what the implications of that are. So that's why there is this new effort to read more genomes from different places to get a better insight into what the variation might be.
I may have misunderstood what you meant there. So when you say donor, do you mean donor of DNA? Right, so not donor monetarily.
No, sorry, donor of samples, yeah.
Oh, okay.
There was a weird thing I noticed with the Celera Corporation, that they had like a bank of samples of 21 people, of which only a handful of them went through to then become the ones that they analysed. But guess who was included in that bank of 21 people?
The same one guy.
The one guy, yeah.
Henny, it's old news, man.
There was a huge amount of hype at the time about sort of the claimed benefits of this. And so I've got this list of things of people who've claimed that the Human Genome Project will provide insights for, in kind of big, portentous announcements. And we've got molecular medicine, human evolution, which is a bit of a worry, but presumably study of human evolution, not actually making humans evolve, which would be a problem.
How it happened.
Yeah. Diseases, viruses, mutations, cancers, how medicines work, forensics, biofuels and energy, go figure, agriculture, animal husbandry, bioprocessing, risk assessment. I do those at work. It's like, will he slip over the puddle of oil? Will he not slip over the puddle of oil?
Let's have a look at his genetics. How viscous are you?
Was he genetically predisposed not to look where he was stepping? Yeah. Bioarchaeology, anthropology, and commercial development of genomics, DNA products, and all that. The anthropology thing really interests me because this strikes me as being really open to abuse.
I'm trying to work out how it applies to anthropology.
What instinctively makes me nervous is it sounds like racial science.
So kind of like saying, well, this group of people have this gene, these genes.
But see, if you're talking about anthropology, you're then kind of making straight into the jump about cultural practice and the way society, because anthropology is like the study of societies in a way, so the way people form societies, right? Very broadly. I mean, presumably some academic anthropologists out there who would shout at me, but it seems like a huge leap to go from, there's this mutation on this gene here in this population, and therefore they have these cultural practices. I'm not saying that gap can't be bridged, but it seems like such an enormous gulf, intellectually, to get from that point to that point. There's a lot of these, like in that list of things, a lot of these things just make me very nervous. The archaeology thing is really interesting, though.
Yeah.
Because that might help us with where we're from, who is related to each other, do we know where people came from and whatever. Yeah. I think that's curious.
Yes. There was something else you read out that I went, read the list again.
Molecular medicine, evolution, diseases.
I suppose it was evolution.
Evolution.
Which you can see how that's affected things. Our knowledge of where humans have come from, our knowledge of how evolution works has come on leaps and bounds since then.
For sure.
Early hominids and all that kind of thing.
Yeah. But the other things that really makes me nervous here is animal husbandry.
Yeah. How does the Human Genome Project help with animal husbandry?
The word eugenics is just knocking on the door there, isn't it? It's sort of hanging around in the outside of thought.
Yeah.
Could we husband humans? A lot of when you're talking about things like animal husbandry, you're talking about just the techniques. You've developed a load of techniques on how to sequence genomes, how to isolate and find bits of the genome, the computing that might require, the software, the lab techniques and whatever. One of the things I thought was an interesting parallel to draw here, because it starts in 1984-85, and there's another project at the same time that the Americans have as like a big super bit of science, and it's the superconducting super collider. Which, do you remember that sort of being talked about?
Yeah.
Kind
of.
It was like a really vast version of what we have at CERN in Switzerland now, but it would be bigger. It was a huge project, billions of dollars to be spent on it, and they started building it, and then they killed it off in the 1990s because largely these big science projects were ways of putting one up the Soviet Union.
Right.
There was this sort of Cold War clash between things. It's interesting, this starts in 1990, so I think one of the reasons that this ever happens is actually that it's kind of one of the last bits of the Cold War.
Yeah, get it done before the Soviets do.
Yeah, and it's a big dollop of public cash, $3 billion to sort of put, like, for a 15-year project. But it happens just before the Soviet Union collapses. By that point, they've already cancelled... Oh, no, the Super Collider's cancelled a bit later on, but the Genome Project is the one that survives, despite the fact it's kind of blue skies and it's unclear what the benefits are going to be. I suppose in its favour, it has lots of kind of big pharmacological industries sort of surrounding it going, but there's potentially big money here.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Well, didn't you know, like, Pet, it's old news.
The next bit I wanted to look at was the status of gene therapy, because I think this is one of the things we hope to sort of gain from this.
That's what everyone expected, that you would be able to cure everything by therapeuting genes.
And especially cancers.
Yeah. I always, in my mind, I always imagine people just sort of getting a bit of DNA and just massaging it a bit. Just giving it a bit of a rub. There you go. You're cured of disease.
Yeah. I think there's echoes here slightly of when we did the cloning episode. So if you haven't downloaded the cloning episode, now's your chance. Catch up. And there's been this huge amount of promise, and obviously this dates back to sort of the early 2000s, and very little has been made of it. Right. So the earliest example of a gene therapy being tried was in 1990. So obviously this is slightly before the Human Genome Project's complete, but well, at the beginning, outset of it. It has very limited success for like a couple of people in the trial. That's it. Nothing's really come of it. As of now, there's only one licensed gene therapy. One thing I do remember very clearly, and sort of this is in the kind of the latter stages of the project, there was a chap called Jesse Gelsinger. He was an 18-year-old, and so we're talking about money and economic pressures here, right? So he was an 18-year-old with a liver condition, and so there was a trial to see, well, can we get him to have this gene therapy and he'd be able to process some sort of protein. It's to do with getting rid of ammonia out of the blood and all this, and died within a couple of days of the therapy.
Oh dear. Right.
Yeah, so they use like a virus as the vector to get the new gene into his system, and he just suffers a massive immune system response, and within a couple of days he dies of organ failure. It's intensely sad, and I can remember this being a big splash in the papers at the time. It turned out in the investigations afterwards, he was actually a substitute for the original volunteer who had pulled out, and it turned out he was unsuitable.
Okay.
Right, because he had certain blood levels that were unsuitable, and he really wasn't a good replacement for the original volunteer. He wasn't really given the full information. Monkeys that had been given a similar treatment had also died,
right,
and they didn't tell him of that properly. And also the other patients where they tried similar things, obviously in the kind of the build up to the full trial, had suffered really very serious reactions. So there's a whole bunch of risks in there that they didn't tell him about. It's one of these things where the institute involved, that's one of the universities in the States, they kind of accepted the report. I think that like the legal settlement was done out of court, so there was a big sort of payment to the family, but like no liability was kind of But this totally damaged the field. It was back in 1999. A lot of scientists had their funding withdrawn. People were reluctant to go down that track. You know, like I think a lot of ethics committees were just concerned about, well, are we just going to kill more people? And it turns out that the researchers concerned had financial interests in the potential treatment.
Yep, I knew that was where it was going.
Yeah.
More interested in getting a result than doing good science and getting accurate results.
Yeah.
Meaningful results.
And I think this is the problem, isn't it? I think these cures, if we can get them to work, are so tempting. And you see the economic pressures, it must be like gold fever. I absolutely don't want to excuse the behaviour of the people here, but poor guy, 18 years old, was living with his condition, you know, was obviously receiving a treatment that could keep him going at that point. You know, he wasn't told the risks.
Old news.
The last thing I wanted to touch on, the latest thing which I've seen a lot of hype around is a thing called CRISPR. Have you come across CRISPR?
No, I don't think so.
Right. So what made me laugh was that it's what they call a gene editing technique. And there's this idea... well, just the name of it is CRISPR, which makes it like a certain location-based dating app. I thought, oh, you know, I've heard so much about this and everybody's talking about it, and it's a kind of new way of getting genes into, you know, a genome and like literally editing bits out and putting new bits in. Yeah. But I went to look at some of this, exactly what it was, and I'll be honest with you, I have no clue.
So it's not someone with some really tiny tweezers.
Yeah,
pulling out a little line
and a scalpel. A scalpel.
Tiny, really sharp scalpel, like Death's Scythe.
Yeah. Well, I just had visions of, like, you know, the old-fashioned film editing suites where you've literally got a run of film coming through, and you're going to slice it there and there and put a new bit in and join it. You know,
I used to do that with magnetic tape.
Oh yeah. In your
razor blade,
yeah.
Tiny bit of white tape.
Yeah. So as far as I understand, it's all to do with like using some sort of, I don't know, bacterial thing. That's as much as I understand of it. But it does seem that all the hype that surrounds that is that this is going to be the new way in for genetic therapies. That now that we're kind of starting to understand a bit of kind of the data that came out of the Human Genome Project, and we kind of know where things are, the locations of things, the importance of bits of the data. Now we've got a technique to actually go fiddle with them, and we can go fiddle with them really accurately, because this has been one of the problems. I mean, as far as gene therapy goes, there's been 3 deaths in that research. One's the case we mentioned, but there's 2 others as well. One of them, they ended up sort of just basically creating a cancer. They died of a leukemia. So this idea of this CRISPR technology is that you can very accurately target it. But there's a huge amount of hype around this, and, you know, this is going to be the technique we need to then move on with this sort of molecular medicine, and personalised medicine's a big thing, which I noticed sort of rereading.
Yes, I've read about that.
Yeah, this idea that you would have medicine that would just be targeted for you. My feeling, and this is just my feeling, is we've been promised this before.
Yeah, it feels a lot like, it'd be another 40 years, a bit like nuclear fusion.
Yeah,
it'll be ready for use in 40 years. It's been like that for the last 40.
Yeah, every 10 years somebody says in 40 years time it'll be ready. Yeah. I think one of the arguments I came across was that the reason why it's so challenging is just because the quantity of data is so vast. It's like a large, is it 22 billion base pairs or whatever it is. It's a huge amount of numbers to crunch. The ability to analyze that data increases as per computing power, and so they're saying that the ability to understand that data will follow Moore's law. And Moore's law, this idea of, is it to do with transistors on a silicon chip, isn't it?
Originally,
that would sort of double every,
or half in price.
Yeah, every year, every
2 years,
2 years or whatever. Something like that. So there would be this exponential growth. So far, Moore's law has broadly sort of held.
Not quite. It's slowed down.
It has slowed
recently.
down in recent times. But one of the things that has improved is our ability to produce software that can crunch the data. So then it just becomes a matter of how many computing cycles you throw at a problem. And obviously, once you've got the human genome data set, which we already have, we've had that in the bag for 10 years now, it's just a matter of computing power to do these things. So the argument is not so much that this is a technology which is 40 years in the future now. It's more sort of the technology is already here. It's just a matter of actually throwing computing cycles at it.
Right.
And thereby we can sort of extract data and, understanding.
Old news.
We live in an interesting world, and I think one of the last things I wanted to mention was kind of one of my kind of favourite movies, which does date from this era, is Gattaca.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, have you seen that?
I have.
Yeah. And so for the listeners who haven't, it's a science fiction tale about where most people are born in a genetically improved way. They've eliminated all of the...
They're designer babies.
They are designer
basically,
babies.
yeah.
But there's like an underclass of people who were born who were too poor.
Yeah.
To not have that kind of treatment. And you just wonder, is this the world we're heading into?
It could be, yeah.
What does this mean for humanity generally? That there was that one treatment that costs $1.6 billion ago. Treatments like that might just become the preserve of the rich and famous. Talk about the American sort of flavour of these debates. Like there's comments about people fear very much what insurance companies would do with this information, but that fear only exists where you don't have national health systems.
Yeah.
And that struck me as just being like a really American fear.
Yeah.
Whereas I think we in the kind of the European West would sort of go, well, if the NHS has my genome on file,
probably quite useful for them to know.
Fine. Yeah, they might send me a letter and say, "Oh, yeah, you due a cancer next week. Do you want to come in?"
We'll remove your arm. Ready?
Yeah. We've grown a new arm for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll go to the spares farm.
Yeah.
Pick up your clone.
Yeah. So here we are in the same debates as that we were in the cloning episodes. Yeah. And I thought this was the echo of that episode of great promise and like not having really delivered on it yet. And something which there was a huge amount of fanfare. There doesn't seem to be really a huge amount tangible out of it yet. I think we're of an age now where we will see some of the benefits.
Yeah, when we need it.
Perhaps, but whether we'll be rich enough to see the benefits.
Yeah, well, we're not all sea-going engineers.
This allegation that I'm rich.
That's what the funnel's for, isn't it? For you to put all your wallets in.
All so I can sit on them, look at the top of the funnel, watching the smoke come out the engine. Yeah. So that's kind of where I wanted to go with this.
As usual, would like to thank Peter Kitson, Haley, Stephen and Etienne for the use of their voices, and bensound.com for the use of the royalty-free music. Well, thank you all for listening. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you, and I've been Russell.
And I've been David. I still am.
You still are, David. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Hello, my name's David.
And I'm Russell.
And this is...
Good news. Should we try that again?
That bit's still going in.
Oh, right. It's the outtake at the end, right?
Okay, yeah, let's do it again.
Okay. Joint episode with the excellent no, what are they called? Should we try that again? We'll record that again. That's right.
Okay. The one that's not Snapchat. What's the other phone-based picture one.